Typically in our community, there's a lot of protocol, but we're on Capitol Hill and we have votes. So we're going to move things just a little faster than normal. I want to thank everybody for being here. Obviously, this is a very important issue and a very important event. To set the tone for the afternoon, I'm going to ask Chairman Butterfield of the CBC to come up and give his remarks.
Thank you very much, Ben, and good afternoon, one and all. We are here today to unite around a common vision for the future. For more than 44 years, the Congressional Black Caucus has been on the front lines fighting for opportunity and equality in education, healthcare, housing, and many other areas. Today, that fight expands to technology. The CBC and the tech industry share a common goal: to transform our society by unlocking the human potential to develop solutions that will improve our lives and those of generations to come. But as we try to solve some of the world's greatest challenges, many of our best and brightest problem solvers are not being included. America has yet to unlock the full potential of innovation because of the lack of African American representation in the technology industry. Together, we have the opportunity to change that. That is why today we are launching CBC Tech 2020, an initiative to bring together the best minds in tech, nonprofit, education, and public sectors to increase African American inclusion at all levels of the technology industry. According to the Level Playing Field Institute, there will be an estimated 1.4 million new tech jobs within the next 5 years by 2020. And 70% of those jobs will remain unfilled at the rate U.S. universities are producing graduates for these roles. We invited you all here today to forge a path forward of mutual accountability and commitment to addressing diversity in the tech workforce. We can only achieve real, measurable success as solutions-oriented partners. We're calling on each of you as stakeholders, whether you represent a nonprofit, a company, a school, or you're a member of Congress, to commit to working with us to achieve full representation of African Americans at every single level of the industry by the year 2020. We're confident that if we work together, we can reach this bold goal by taking specific steps. First, we are calling on tech companies to adopt a Tech 2020 Diversity and African American Inclusion Plan, which includes, number one, making African American inclusion a priority for the company's board of directors and executive leadership, and integrating its commitment to inclusion of underrepresented minorities in the company's values statement. Number two, setting clear public goals to measurably increase the number of African Americans at all levels within the companies, with external contractors and with its affiliated venture capital investment. These goals should also include short-term solutions to increase African American representation in non-engineering or tech roles, such as communications or legal and accounting. Companies annually about their progress toward achieving these goals and disclose the EEO-1 data. Number three, provide significant financial and human capital resources to achieve these goals. Number four, sharing best practices to ensure broad success and long-term viability of the technology sector. Number five, increasing the use of African American-owned vendors. Many of you feel very strongly about that. Increasing the use of African American-owned vendors and requiring majority-owned vendors to meet specific diversity goals. We recognize that some companies have made progress in many of these areas, but we also know that many others have a long way to go. We are confident that if the industry uses the same entrepreneurial spirit that it used to make America the leader in innovation, tech companies can certainly implement innovative approaches to African American inclusion. We call on tech-focused nonprofits to adopt a Tech 2020 Diversity and African American Inclusion Plan that will evaluate specific programs that seek to increase African Americans in the technology sector to determine which programs are most effective. Identify challenges that are unique to the African American community that may be stifling their inclusion in the tech sector, and identify specific strategies to remove these obstacles. Collaborate with nonprofits and the private sector to scale their efforts to increase African American inclusion and to develop best practices for increasing African American representation. Additionally, educational institutions must join in these efforts and work with the private sector to develop curriculum that will close the skills gap and ensure our students are competitive for tech and non-tech jobs in these companies. Thirdly, the government has a role to play as well. Educating the next generation of innovators must be a national priority. Congress in particular, is integral to this effort. So we will call on our colleagues to join us in addressing this critical issue, particularly as it relates to building and strengthening the STEM pipeline and fighting against cuts to STEM education in the No Child Left Behind Act. But as we work to strengthen this pipeline for the future, there are many qualified African Americans right now with marketing and engineering and accounting, law, and computer science degrees ready to go to work right now in the technology sector. So as a first step, we invite you to partner with us to host job fairs in targeted CBC member districts to recruit people where they are. Work with us, please, on legislation to invest in education, job training, and expanding internet access. Invite us to your companies. Please do that. Invite us to your companies to meet with your board of directors and senior leadership. It will be productive. It will not be confrontational. CBC members will hit the road and take our message to Silicon Valley and beyond to meet with CEOs and leaders of organizations to engage more partners in this important work. We call on everyone here, and those watching us live. Are we on TV? Watching us live. Excuse me. Now, y'all didn't tell me that in the back room. In all seriousness, we call on everyone here and those watching us live to take the first step by going to the CBC's new tech webpage and sign up to be a CBC Tech 2020 partner. Join us in this historic opportunity to transform the technology industry, transform our country, and develop solutions that will eventually change the world. I thank each of you for coming. As Ben Targella said a moment ago, there are votes going to be in progress momentarily. If you see us leave, there are good reasons for our departure. Thank you very much for having us today.
Thank you, Chairman. You know, folks, before I bring up the co-chair of the CBC Tech Task Force, Congresswoman Barbara Lee, I want you to think about one thing, just two quick things. One, in our community, you know, when we say the black middle class, we think of like teachers and postal workers. Well, IT workers are now equal with teachers as components of the black middle class. You want to know why PG County is so wealthy as a black community? Look at the census stats for black IT workers. Two, you know, in the Silicon Valley, they say, well, we just can't find black programmers. We can't find what in the census code is called computer professionals. There are 10 times as many right here in the Chesapeake Bay region as there are in the San Francisco Bay region. There's about 3,000 to 5,000 out there. There's about 35,000 to 40,000 here. So we exist, and they need to open the doors. And that's why I'm excited to bring up the chairman of the CBC's, the co-chair of the CBC's Tech Diversity Task Force from Oakland, California, which is literally both on the front line of this diversity and inclusion battle in the Silicon Valley in two ways. One, it is the next hot place for the Silicon Valley to expand to. It's where the real estate's going up and people are moving in. But two, Oakland is Oakland. And as somebody whose venture capital firm is based in Oakland, Capeport Capital, where I'm a partner, we like to say, as Oakland becomes more tech, we will ensure that tech becomes more like Oakland.
Good afternoon. First, let me start by thanking Ben, who is a partner at Capeport Capitol, located in my congressional district. I want to say welcome again here to Capitol Hill. Capeport is really leading the way on diversifying the tech workforce and preparing our next generation of tech workers, entrepreneurs. And so if you don't know Capeport, hopefully you'll get a chance to know them and the great work that they're engaged in. Let me take a moment also to thank Chairman Butterfield for your tremendous and very bold leadership of the Congressional Black Caucus, and also of his long-standing leadership in the work of diversity efforts, even before he became chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, but now especially in terms of his support for and work with the Congressional Black Caucus's Diversity Task Force. Thank you very much. Also, there are some of our Diversity Task Force members here today, and I'd just like to take a moment to acknowledge all of them, but we start Congresswoman Maxine Waters, who's a very active member of our task force, Congressman Sanford Bishop from Georgia, Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson, from Texas, Congressman Benny Thompson from Mississippi, Congressman Emmanuel Cleaver, who's with us today from the great state of Missouri, Congressman Hakeem Jeffers, who's here with us today from New York, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke from New York, and I know other members will be here, but they have been such an integral part of pulling all this together today. So I just want to thank all of you for your leadership, and we'll hear from members of the task force in just a minute. Also, let me acknowledge someone who has really led the way to get companies to wake up to the issue of the lack of inclusion and diversity in tech. Of course, our warrior, our friend, the Reverend Jesse Jackson. And Jesse, I just have to thank you for being here today. We look forward to hearing from you later on, but just know that, especially in the Bay Area, his work is unparalleled. So thank you again, Reverend Jackson, for once again paving the way. Also, let me thank all of you who are here today from the press, from the tech industry, from our students, of course, who are here with us, the real future of African Americans in tech, one of whom we'll hear from in a few minutes. Now, I do represent a district which is in the heart of the innovation hub of the San Francisco Bay Area, and I've had the opportunity, some with my Congressional Black colleagues actually, to visit some of the biggest and most prominent tech firms in the world. So I'm glad to see the CBC taking on this initiative to address what I've seen and worked on for many, many years coming from the next county from Silicon Valley. And that is a complete lack of representation of African Americans in the ranks of these companies. So that's what we're here today to fix. Chairman Butterfield has already given you an overview of CBC Tech 2020 initiative, and let me just take a moment to talk about the principles behind this effort, and our colleagues are going to provide further insights into these principles in the discussion that follows. First, of course, is transparency. Companies need to regularly and publicly report their diversity statistics and progress toward inclusion goals. Second, of course, is education and training. Companies must invest in the pipeline of African American STEM talent through proactive outreach and training for African American students and job seekers. Third is corporate responsibility and investment. Philanthropic efforts and capital investments need to support underserved communities and disadvantaged enterprises. Finally, of course, hiring and retention. Chairman Butterfield talked about the direct and targeted recruitment of qualified African American candidates. This needs to be coupled with the development of a culture, mind you, a culture that welcomes African American employees and acknowledges the role that inclusion and diversity plays in innovation. Extremely important. Technology, education, corporate responsibility, hiring. That's TECH, tech. These are the simple principles that can break down the barriers to inclusion in the innovation economy. Let's be clear. Technology has revolutionized our lives and driven one of the fastest growing industries in our country. African Americans must be included in every aspect of that revolution, not just targeted as end users, but targeted as part of this overall industry. We're not just part of a market share, but we're part of what will make this really work for the world and also for our own communities here. So this initiative is really crucial to making that a reality. As the momentum for change continues to build and companies are starting to see that innovation requires a representative and diverse workforce, I know that we're going to see the CBC and this initiative be a driving force toward truly inclusion in the workforce by 2020. Thank you again for being here. Remember to join our conversation by using hashtag #TechDiversity, and I have to take a moment to acknowledge and thank our staff. Where's the staff? Because they have worked 24/7. Troy, Julie, all of the staff members who've worked so hard on putting this together. I just have to thank them and acknowledge them. Thank you again for being here.
All right, well, we're going to keep this moving because we do have votes coming up. I'm going to ask the members of the task force to please take seats on the stage, and we're going to hop into questions and answers. That includes you, Congressman Jeffries. You know, as folks are coming up here, I really do want a second, and we'll hear from Reverend Jackson later, but you know, I got two questions. You know, one was, well, why is he here? Why is he here? I said, well, you know, Reverend Jackson's kind of like smoke, y'all. He doesn't show up unless there's fire. So you all need to ask yourself, why are we on fire? and then somebody else said, well, you know, well, why didn't he come sooner? And I said, well, you know, he's kind of like we say about God in the black church. He may not come when you want him, but he's always right on time. So.
I'm sorry, we think we're going to go to the student due to vote, so instead of going into the tech principals, I think we're just going to go to the student.
Okay, so after this?
Yes.
Okay, all right, great. So we're going to do the panel, and then we're going to bring up a student. All right, the first question goes to Congressman Jeffries from New York. Why is it so important that tech companies be transparent about their diversity data, and how should those? And how does that data compare to what we see versus their their inclusion targets?
Well, no, thank you for the question, and it's an honor and a privilege to be here, to be part of the task force, and to be involved in this very, very important issue. I think Justice Brandeis once made the observation that sunlight is the best disinfectant. And to the extent that we all know we have an issue in terms of the absence of relative diversity within Silicon Valley, specifically the tech and innovation economy generally, to both diagnose the heart of the problem and begin to work toward resolution, we think that it's important for all of the companies within the technology and innovation economy space be transparent with first where they are at as it relates to the diversity numbers in the context of African Americans within the workforce, within the leadership, within the board structure, as well as where these companies will need to go in order to have a more inclusive workforce, a more inclusive company, in a manner that will benefit not just the African American community, but the company, the consumers, in making for a better company in terms of its capacity to tap into the talent that doesn't exist. And so we think in terms of transparency, we want to have centralized diversity numbers, programs designed to increase outreach, access, and opportunity, information that's centralized with respect to internships as well as scholarships. And we think in the tech space particularly, centralizing that information in the context of a website seems to make the most sense. And it's important to note, finally, that data and metrics have been a critical part of the success and the growth of the technology and innovation economy companies generally. And if anyone can utilize data and information and metrics to achieve an objective, it's the tech companies, and we would just like to see that happen in the context of achieving our diversity goals.
No, that's exactly right. And we have been joined by Congresswoman Maxine Waters, the ranking member of the House Committee on Financial Services. It is great to see you. Thank you for being here. Next question goes to Congressman Cleaver. What about our HBCUs, our historically white colleges and universities, our high schools, our K through 12 in its entirety? What should education and STEM education institutions be doing to prepare our young people in our community for the future?
Well, thank you for doing this. I think it's critically important for all of us, not just the young people, but for sure the young people. If I can just spend a second following up with what my colleague said, I pledged Alpha when I was in college. I'm not mad at other people, but it's just I'm just mentioning it. And so, and they can't do this anymore. You know, the things that we went through, they can't do. It's illegal. They put you in prison. But one night, the Big Brothers put the Sphinxman in the back of a pickup and drove about an hour, and then put us out in a field, an empty field, and told us that if we could make it to the highway, that would be the pickup would be there to take us. But we didn't know which way to go. We didn't know how close we were. We stumbled around for 3 or 4 hours in the dark, and I think that you know, if you know the direction, there's a much greater chance you can reach your target. And right now, the transparency is important because we need to know which way we are, where we are, and the direction we need to travel, as opposed to just wandering around in the dark. And we almost need to have the same process as NFL, and that is there's a requirement for before you hire any coaches, you have to at least interview one African American coach, and I think that fits for corporate America as well.
The Rooney Rule.
I think the Rooney, it's called the Rooney Rule, or here it's called the Cleaver Rule. What I'm suggesting is that with regard to the HBCUs, I think one of the things that should happen is that the tech companies need to invest in HBCUs and invest thickly and deeply, because you have this untapped source of brilliance. When you look at all of the African Americans who have risen to great heights, like the chairman here, like Reverend Jackson, many of us here, they came from HBCUs. So we obviously know there's talent. And so I think, for example, I mean, the tech companies would serve themselves well to invest large sums of money into recruiting and training young African Americans for these high-tech jobs that are 21st century jobs. And I think to some degree we need to realize that there are some jobs that we need to eliminate. I think I have a problem now with the proprietary schools because they're training people to jobs that don't exist. And if you go to you get a Pell Grant and go to nail filing school, whatever it's called, and you get through, and there are no nail filing jobs, and you just spent $25,000. And so I think we need to, in my estimation, it's something that we need to do is redirect Pell Grants so that we can get more of our young, bright minds involved in the 21st century jobs, which this is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we've, folks, if you just came in, we're talking fast and we're kind of moving fast because there's votes coming up. And so next we're going to go to Congresswoman Waters, and then we're going to bring up the student and Reverend Jackson. So I apologize for the abbreviated afternoon, but it's important work to be done. Question for you, Congresswoman Waters, is what are the most vital areas for corporate investment to ensure workforce and supplier diversity?
Thank you for the question. I really came here today to thank my friend, Reverend Jackson, for the leadership
Amen.
That he's provided on this issue. Much of what we're talking about today, he's already identified as the problems that exist in the high-tech industry, and he's engaged them. And because he engaged them, they came up with the data that we needed to basically confirm what we already knew, that there is a lack of diversity, there's a lack of investment, there's a lack in training, et cetera, et cetera. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this work that he has done is extremely important. And what we need to do as a Congressional Black Caucus is to literally get with him to ensure implementation of some of the agreements that have already been made. I think the high-tech industry is prepared to do that now. They've gotten rich, they've made a lot of money, they've made a lot of people rich. We went in on the deal. Now it's our time. And I think they're ready to do that. And so whether it is the information that we have gotten about, a lack of diversity, or whether they have agreed to advance some resources in order to support education or to look at joint ventures, et cetera, et cetera. We need implementation and we need accountability. And so there's really not a lot new that we can say about what's needed. He's done that. He's identified that. They've kind of agreed to that. And so for those companies that have not released the data yet, we need that data. We want that information. For all the agreements that you have gotten from them, that's fine. The only one thing that I don't know a lot about is investments and joint ventures and increased participation in the businesses that we have that need to grow and need to expand. So we know what we have to do. The Congressional Black Caucus is in a strategic position to enforce and to see to it that implementation takes place. We are supporters. We're the ones who basically support many of that which the high-tech industry is now focusing on. We're sitting on all these committees. We're on Judiciary Committee. We're on the Financial Services Committee. And while we have been very generous in our support without having received a lot in exchange, now it is quid pro quo. And it is time for us to say, yes, we agree with some of what you want and what you're talking about, whether it's open internet or some of the other kinds of things. Now, what are you going to do for us? It's time for implementation. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. No, that's right. And quite frankly, my peers in the venture capital field know that we can do better. We at Cape Work Capital, 48% of the companies that we invest in are Black, Latino, or women-founded. We're eager to actually see that go higher because our investment table is 80% Black, Latino, and female. To help see the ecosystem, we've invested in 3 of them just in the last month through our foundation, the Cape Work Center for Social Impact, in 4 more Black-led venture capital companies to help. In this case, it's virtually all brothers, and one woman-owned that's Black and white-led. So 5 just in the last few months to expand, and that's one of the exciting things, is that the face of VC is changing, and we should accelerate that, and Reverend Jackson is helping us do that. Before we go to Reverend Jackson, it's my pleasure, my honor indeed, to bring up Ms. Olivia Zama. She's 14, she's an 8th grader at Thomas Johnson Middle School. All right, let's hear it for Thomas Johnson. She's on the honor roll. She has been an active participant in GEM, Great Engineers in the Making, and she has won several awards for her hard work. She is with her principal, Mr. Rodney McBride, the principal of Thomas Johnson Middle School. Ms. Zama, will you please come up?
8 minutes.
Good evening. Growing up, it was stressed by my parents that I needed to go to school and do well. At the age of 2, I moved from Cameroon to the U.S. with my siblings and my parents. We wanted a better life and better education opportunities. When I was little, I wanted to be a doctor. It seemed like the obvious choice. Almost everyone in my family was doing something in the medical field. When I came to Thomas Johnson Middle School in the 6th grade, I had no clue what STEM was. I just thought, this is a class for smart people. When I actually started to take the class, I kept thinking to myself, what's all the fuss about STEM? It's just a class that we need to complete. It's not a big deal. The first week of Gateway to Technology was focused on the introduction of what is STEM and STEM careers and what engineers could do. I didn't know it then, but this class would prepare us to be the workforce of tomorrow. The question in my mind is, how can this class prepare me to be globally competitive since we are just in middle school? At first, I was not interested in the class because we didn't have any resources. But then we had our first hands-on lesson. It changed my perspective about STEM and about myself. And since then, my classmates and I were always curious of what exciting things we will do in STEM. In STEM class, we learn how to think critically to solve design challenges that has real-life application. We needed to learn how to use tools like a solder gun and a saw in order to do our projects. What surprised me the most is I learned to do things that I had no idea I was capable of doing at my age. We were able to design and build a dorm furniture that is multifunctional and can fit in a small space out of cardboard. We built a water filter. We also built a prosthetic arm, a hovercraft, and a robotics arm. Ms. Rayella saw my potential and encouraged me to join TJMS GEMS, which stands for Great Engineers in the Making. My STEM class provided me with knowledge and skills to be competitive. It taught me how to think critically and find solutions to my problems. My team won the solar system competition, and I was able to go to International Space Camp in Huntsville, Alabama, where I experienced how to live like a real astronaut for a week. I applied what I learned in STEM class to solve the challenges in the camp. In 8th grade, Ms. Rayella exposed our team to more challenges in class and outside the classroom. I slowly started to realize my calling through the many experiences I got from classroom projects, field trips, and competitions. I realized that STEM is all around us. Why be boxed up as only a doctor? I could be an engineer and help a broader range of people. I get to use my hands and my mind more freely. The STEM class guides me on what I really want to be in the future. I want to pursue an engineering career in college. STEMS is a hands-on, minds-on, problem-based, and project-based learning. If more students will be given the opportunity that was given to me by my teacher, then I believe that more students will be motivated in pursuing STEM careers, and our country and the whole world will become more productive and will be a better place to live for everyone. Thank you guys, and good evening.
All right, I'm being told that that y'all need to go vote. So, well, this is on live TV, so maybe they can stream it in. All right, well, y'all, again, I apologize for the abbreviated nature of the program today, but the business of our capital is very important. You've heard Congresswoman Waters talk about how incredibly impactful his work has been to push frankly, the biggest tech companies out of their stage of denial, get the ostrich's head out of the sand. You've heard Congresswoman Lee talk about just the way he has changed the discourse in her hometown in Oakland, right at the front edge. And well, you've heard me compare him to God. So without further ado, let me bring up our leader on diversity for so many decades, the man who is on the cutting edge of pushing for greater inclusion in tech right now, Reverend Jesse Jackson.
Thank you, Ben. Good afternoon. I want to lay out, first of all, thank Congressman Butterfield and Congresswoman Lee and Jeffers and Maxine, those who participated so far today. A part of our challenge is to demythologize this whole notion of how foreign this notion is, and somehow we cannot touch it. It's too far away from us. The top 20 companies in Silicon Valley have 189 board members, 36 white women, 3 African Americans, and 1 Latino, just for warm-ups. Their C-suites are like 370. 3 Latinos and 3 African Americans. The employment tops out around 2% across the board, 2%. The investments in startups, virtually zero. Because in that culture, people tend to hire people or to invest in people that they know and trust and like. And we're not in that cycle. We have found that there is not a talent deficit. There is an opportunity deficit. This is the first we raised the issue about the EEO-1 reports. We were told we could not have EEO-1 data because it would put companies at a competitive disadvantage. The fact is that was not true. It would embarrass them. But more than that, the competitive issue is that they filed a lawsuit and they won. They won the right not to make their data available. So what we did was we bought shares of stock in the companies and went around that circle as shareholders as opposed to sharecroppers. and went to remember going to X meeting, and there's a time that you can take the floor, and said African Americans and Latinos at about 30% index, but none of them on our board as an hour, or any of them in our C-suites. Are we investing in any of their startups? The backdrop of that is a fundamentally old scheme of civil rights development organization. In the room is, of course, Bloomberg and Wall Street Journal and the tech companies, and they have an obligation by law to, in fact, expose the data. Well, we are almost never present at the shareholders meeting. Those meetings have an awesome power because all of the board members and all the critical press is at those meetings. I went to a J.P. Morgan shareholders meeting in Detroit earlier today, raising very basic concerns about the board, about investment, about the lawsuits they're facing now, raised about a plan for Baltimore and Detroit for urban reconstruction. We have no urban reconstruction plan in Detroit. There are 80,000 vacant homes or abandoned lots, not one chain store, not one chain drugstore, not one black dealership in Detroit. The police, teachers, and firemen don't live there, so they get the best of jobs. And they take the nectar to the suburbs where they come in every day as occupiers and not as neighbors. We went to the whole range, and the insurance that's the highest in the country. The city cannot live on a formula of guns in, drugs in, and jobs out. We have to study. This is within the context of urban policy. Much like Baltimore, 18,000 vacant homes are abandoned lots. Unemployment on the black side of town, 37%. 80% of the police and firemen live outside the city, and they from Virginia to New York, they come in, they get the jobs, they go right back out. There's alienation between them and the people. Dropout rates in schools around 50%. So there's this kind of open hostility. But the TIF money is spent down on the riverfront, and the pension money is down on the riverfront. The investment money is down on the riverfront. The bank lending is down on the riverfront. The risk capital is down on the riverfront. The two stadiums that are built for the football and baseball teams is down on the riverfront. So one side has green grass, the other is parched earth. And there's nothing wrong with the people, there's something wrong with the formula. You take the same dough, you make dough and you put one dough in a glass and one dough in a cup, and the outcome will look like the structure that is in. There's nothing wrong, it's not the dough, it's the structure. And right now we're being structured out of this education. They said, well, we can't find black engineers. Well, USC and UCLA don't teach them. That's why you cannot find them. They're on this side of the country. They're at Tennessee State, and they're at A&T, and they're at Morgan, and they're at Howard, they're at Hampton, they're at Morehouse and Spelman. The chair of the board of Microsoft is John Thompson from Florida A&M. The incorporating lawyer for Google, which was at that time a company without name, looking for someone to write them up, and David Drummond, an African-American, kind of lawyer from the totem pole, put together the basic papers, legal papers for Google. He is now the secretary to the board at Google. There's no job in Silicon Valley that we cannot master. As we get the floor as shareholders, we bring to them a values-added argument. That is to say that they are, as good as they are, they're like one-eye quarterbacks. They miss too much of the field. On the side of the field that they don't see, blacks, brown, and women are the majority, not the minority population. So on the blind eye side, there's untapped capital, undeveloped talent, market, money, talent, location, creativity, and growth. market, money, talent, creativity, and growth. We spent some time last year fighting over the case of telephone bills for inmates being too high, like $1 a minute for telephone calls. And it's only one-way telephone calls, and we could not get around it because the companies were exploiting the inmates who can only call or collect. One of the inmates heard our case and came out, Doc, and he devised a system whereby you can call through internet and radically reduce the cost. He now has a $5 million business because he was able to apply his creativity to the formula. Another guy we knew had been in jail for breaking in cars. He mastered how to break in cars. So he developed a formula how not to break in cars. You can't bust his lock. Point is, there's this whole world of creativity that's there. And lastly, these companies come out of the Department of Defense for the most part. And so in addition to asking them to please make your data available, we can do that ourselves. These companies have EEO-1 and EEOC and contract compliance legal responsibilities. I say EEO-1 and EEOC and contract compliance. By law, they must honor the law of inclusion. And so we can be found. We do exist. My last point, Pop Garrett, is that most of these jobs out there, in fact, are not STEM and engineers. Engineers are important, and you can find them in black colleges which specialize in training them. You can find STEM if you teach it. We're trying to get 1,000 churches to set up tech labs in their churches. Use some of that empty space of Sunday school not used during the week. Rainbow Push, we set up a room X-size, about 80 portals, and students come in on Saturday, and for 3 or 4 hours, they're working on STEM, working on apps and codes. We should have at least 1,000 churches with 100 students per week. We can produce 100,000 students a year out of our churches alone. I'm not sure they're ever going to break out of where they are unless we put so much pressure that they cannot ignore us. Besides, lastly, we in fact over-index in all these companies. One weekend, we were challenging Twitter to open up their data, and Twitter said they would not do it. They resented that we were making the demand. So on Friday, we organized a tweet on Twitter campaign. We were going to have 100,000 names, petitions on their office by Tuesday. By Monday, Twitter made an adjustment. We have consumer leverage. So we have consumer leverage. We have the law. We also have money, market, talent, location, and creativity. So at some point, I'm convinced now that the atmosphere has shifted from kind of demanding as in guiding. The assumption was that they locked us out in part because they were too smart to see us. Some of them were culturally blind. They were one-eyed quarterbacks. And there's a lot of work out there for lawyers, ad agencies, marketing. We were able to get 2 of the companies, Apple and Google. One had locked out janitors, and one had locked out bus drivers. And as opposed to subcontracting, we got them to bring those workers inside. And last week, Facebook and Google did a phenomenal thing. They raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And what that means is we fight the 1% issue. And there's no reason why this valley cannot start that drive. Somebody working at McDonald's making $8 an hour, working at one of the food companies, that's about $13,000 a year. If 15, they're making $26,000 to $30,000. A husband and wife, that's $50,000 to $60,000. They can work their way out of poverty. There's too much wealth up top to have wages so low at the bottom. And these companies last to have several $1 trillion in offshore tax money that's waiting for a tax deal to be cut. We could take a portion of the offshore tax havens, investing in infrastructure and development, and without raising taxes, expand the revenue base and make the economy stronger for everyone. And so we bring to this agenda a body of knowledge, and there is no talent deficit. There is only and opportunity deficit demanding from us our own experience and creativity. Thank you very much.
You know, guys, as Reverend Jackson was talking and sort of making it plain, it occurred to me that I think some people might think that this battle for inclusion in the Valley is just about black and brown people. A couple of things I think we should just be very clear about. When you ask the average major tech company, how many colleges do you recruit from? The number is always between about 7 and 12. We have 2,000 colleges in this country. Some of the companies are like Pandora. Pandora, you might think, oh, well, you know, if I just need fancy programmers, maybe there's only 7 or 12 colleges to go to. Well, first of all, that's not true. But second of all, some companies like Pandora, 70% of the employees are in ad sales and administration. I know plenty of folks who can sell radio ads. So we cannot let them off the hook, and that's why the heat that Reverend Jackson has turned up is so important. This room that's here, the people that are gathered, y'all, we're an important group of folks. I want everybody to kind of have a sense of who's in the room. So I'm going to ask different groups of people to stand up, and I hope that you will quickly. That way we can see each other, and perhaps folks will know who to talk to about different things that they're excited about. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the students and teachers who are here in the room to please stand up. Second, I want to ask all the pipeline organizations. These are nonprofits who are specifically building the pipeline into tech to stand up, and that includes us at the Cape Center for Social Impact. And I'm going to ask an indulgent. There's one little student here, coming here, who's in the 3rd grade at Silver Spring, this is my daughter Morgan. You can probably tell from her face, but this is my daughter Morgan. So come here, baby. You can stand with Dad. Next, I'm going to ask all the advocacy groups. I saw Spencer Overton is here from the Joint Center. All the other advocacy groups to please stand up. Civil rights groups, rabble-rousers. That includes Butch. All right, thank you. Thank you, my people. Next, my new people, tech company representatives. Will you please stand up? All right. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. Folks from the White House, any Obama staff here? Any of you all still here? Sorry, that was the end of the second term joke. And the last is any congressional staff. All right. They're all standing because they always do. You know, my daughter and I are actually on a field trip of sorts. We're on our way to South Carolina to the National Conference of Women in Technology. So we also talk about the battle for inclusion. Let us be clear that the major tech companies that were around then, like the HPs of the world, will tell you we were producing more female computer programmers 30 years ago than we're doing right now. So we have a battle on our hands, and we have a room here of folks who are dedicated to making change. You know, as I looked at Reverend Jackson, I want us to think about, one thing. There was a time when Reverend Jackson was young, and there were cities and counties that got away with not letting our people vote, not letting black folks vote. He and some other organizers focused, and we changed that. We saw that in Selma, right? Yep. And then there was a time when we had corporations that would not invest with black or Latino-led, female-led investment companies. And he and some organizers focused, and we changed that. And there was a time when we thought that a black man would never be president. And he and some organizers decided to run not one, but 2 campaigns for president and blazed a trail. And we changed that faster than anybody thought was possible. And there's a time when the Silicon Valley, the engine for growth of the 21st century, is no more inclusive than Detroit was 100 years ago. And now we've all decided to join forces. And well before my baby's out there searching for a job, well before these students are out there searching for a job, we're going to change that too. So thank you all. Let's go get it done. God bless. Oh, wait. Oh, and there's one other thing. There's a call to action that Chairman Butterfield put out. You can find it at www.cbc-butterfield.house.gov/tech. It's an address only a congressional worker can love. www.cbc-butterfield.house.gov/tech. I've signed it. I asked you to sign it. This is the CBC's 2020 Tech Diversity Challenge. Please sign it.
Let me have your attention just for a moment, please. The call to action means that, where's Butch Wing? Butch Wing has been our operative director on this in Silicon Valley. Come a little closer, Butch, and we'll haul this with us. Steve, you who can identify your church or a church, you could build a tech lab about X amount of, about the unused Sunday school space from Sunday to Sunday, and get in 35 to 50 desks. And within your congregation are people there who can begin to teach stock market game, what's a bull, what's a bear, and financial literacy, and buy kids computers rather than toys for Christmas. We can start this as a bottom-up movement. We are recruiting 1,000 churches to get a tech lab in their church. We can produce 100,000 students who are STEM conscious and to apps and codes starting now. And so if you're interested in beyond today's session in being a part of this movement, raise your hand. That's the first one. The second piece of this is that they've spent more time up here looking for H-1B workers from out the country than here, as if there's something magic about out the country and a deficit within the country. There's nothing they need that's not in Oakland, or Memphis, or New York, or Chicago, or St. Louis. And so we got to apply the pressure because some of them are culturally limited by their habits. And that is to say that if you live between San Francisco and East Palo Alto, that's a small world. And you live in a bubble out there, and all that they need is on the East Coast and South. For the most part, it's not there. It's out this way. So that this black schools, which is now in trouble because of lack of funding, they could invest in the infrastructure of those who teach engineering. They don't have to find some engineering. There are people who teach the Ron McNairs of the world right now. There are black students coming out of Tennessee State and Morgan State and Howard. Google began to work out a relationship with Howard where they moved in with a couple of top execs and altered or adjusted their math and teaching process. Some of these schools just need tweaking to produce. No schools are better prepared to teach black engineers and teach them. Also, in all these public high schools, they must have tech labs in them. We've been fighting for libraries, but all of them should have tech labs. I guess I'm saying that if we, in fact, join in some action, Rainbow Pushers Convention's in Chicago, June 20th through 24th in Chicago. Going to be a major tech lab feature at that conference at that time, June 20th through 24th in Chicago. Yesterday we had a Google system, a Google workshop in Detroit. Silicon goes to Detroit. Most of the stuff in the car today is tech. You can't use no crank to put your car going no more. You got to really be able to read that stuff. Everything is GPS. Now, you were interested in working with Rainbow Push to follow up on this. I wish you would meet us up front because we want to get your cards and stuff because, again, June 20th through 24th, we're having a convention. A lot of it is going to be with a plan. We must have our own 5-year catch-up plan. I'm not sure they will ever have a 5-year catch-up with them plan. Say effort and excellence means a lot. Inheritance and access means more. Effort and excellence means a lot. Inheritance and access means more. Those who are behind, forever to catch up, must run faster or forever stay behind. Let church say amen.
Amen and amen and amen. Thank you for coming.